The rifle shot that shattered the morning silence of Yuba City, California, in the spring of 1882, wasn't meant to kill anyone, but it sure got everyone's attention at the town meeting that hot April day. Catherine Foster had been standing at the back of the crowded town hall, her hands clenched in the folds of her plain cotton dress, listening to the men argue about the new water rights for nearly an hour. She had something important to say, something that could solve the whole mess, but every time she opened her mouth, someone would shoot her a warning look. The mayor had made it clear 3 months ago, after she dared to speak up about the school funding, that women were to observe these meetings, not participate in them. The shot came from outside, probably some drunk cowhand firing into the air, but it caused enough commotion that several men rushed to the windows. Catherine took a step forward, her heart hammering, but before she could speak, old Herbert Marsh turned and glared at her with such venom that she stepped back again, swallowing her words like bitter medicine. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and living on the small ranch her father had left her when he died 2 years prior. The Foster place wasn't much, just 40 acres on the eastern edge of town with a modest house and a barn that needed repairs, but it was hers. She'd been managing it herself with the help of one elderly ranch hand named Tom, who was better at giving advice than actual labor. Most of the townspeople thought she should sell the place and move in with her aunt in Sacramento, become a proper lady who did needlework and waited for some man to marry her. But Catherine had her father's stubborn streak and her mother's sharp mind, and she'd be damned if she'd give up the only home she'd ever known. The meeting resumed after the disturbance proved to be nothing serious. The argument continued, voices rising as tempers flared. The issue was simple enough. The Wilson family, who owned the largest ranch in the area, wanted to divert more water from the creek that ran through several properties, including Catherine's. If they did that, at least 4 smaller ranches would suffer, possibly lose their cattle to thirst during the dry summer months. Catherine knew the creek better than anyone. She'd spent her childhood exploring every inch of it, and she'd discovered something 3 weeks ago that could solve everything. A natural spring on the Wilson property itself that could provide all the water they needed without touching the creek. But she wasn't allowed to speak. The door to the town hall opened, letting in a shaft of bright sunlight and a tall figure that Catherine didn't recognize. He was a cowboy. That much was clear from his dusty boots, worn denim pants, and the hat he removed as he entered. He had dark hair that needed a cut, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He moved to the side of the room, leaning against the wall with an easy confidence that suggested he was used to being wherever he wanted to be. Mayor Thompson was red in the face now, arguing with James Wilson about property rights and historical precedent. Nobody was getting anywhere. The meeting had devolved into the same circular arguments they'd been having for weeks. Catherine felt the frustration building in her chest like steam in a kettle. She took another step forward, and this time she didn't stop. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. There's a spring on the Wilson property that could solve this whole problem. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her. The mayor's face went from red to purple. "Miss Foster," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I believe we've discussed the rules of these meetings." "I understand the rules, Mayor Thompson, but I also understand water, and I know that creek better than anyone in this room." Catherine's voice didn't waver, even though her hands were shaking. "There's a natural spring on the western edge of the Wilson Ranch that flows year-round. I've seen it. If you dig a proper well there, you'd have more than enough water without ever touching the creek." James Wilson turned to face her, his expression skeptical. I've lived on that land for 30 years, Miss Foster. I think I'd know if there was a spring. It's hidden by a rock formation near the old oak grove, Catherine continued, pressing her advantage even though she could feel the disapproval radiating from half the room. The water flows underground and emerges about 20 feet from the base of the largest oak. In summer, when everything else is dry, that spot stays green and muddy. Before anyone could respond, the cowboy who'd entered a few minutes ago pushed off from the wall. His voice was deep and calm, cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. I'd like to hear what she has to say. The mayor turned to him, clearly irritated by another interruption. And who might you be? Kane Reeves, the cowboy said. Just got hired as foreman on the Wilson Ranch. He looked directly at Catherine, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Seems to me if someone knows the land well enough to spot a spring that could save everyone a lot of trouble, we ought to listen. Your opinion matters most, miss, seeing as you're the one who found it. The words hung in the air. Catherine stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. A man, a stranger no less, was standing up for her right to speak in a room full of people who'd been silencing her for months. James Wilson cleared his throat. Kane's right. If there's a spring where she says there is, we should check it out before we make any decisions. He looked at Catherine with new interest. You're sure about this, Miss Foster? I'm certain, Catherine said, finding her voice again. I can show you exactly where it is. The mayor sputtered, trying to regain control of the meeting, but the momentum had shifted. Several other ranchers chimed in, saying it was worth investigating. Within 10 minutes, it was decided that a group would ride out to the Wilson Ranch the next morning to look for the spring. Catherine would guide them. As the meeting broke up, Catherine found herself standing near the door, still slightly dazed by what had just happened. Kane Reeves approached her, hat in hand, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thank you, Catherine said, meeting his eyes. They were gray, she noticed, like storm clouds over the mountains. You didn't have to do that. Seemed like the right thing to do, Kane said with a shrug. Besides, I've only been in town 3 days, but I've already heard enough nonsense in that meeting to last me a lifetime. If you've got a solution, people should hear it, regardless of whether you're wearing a dress or pants. Catherine felt a smile tugging at her own lips. That's a progressive attitude for these parts. I've been a lot of places, seen a lot of things, Kane said. Learned pretty quick that smart ideas can come from anyone, and only a fool ignores good advice because of who's giving it. They walked out of the town hall together, into the bright afternoon sunshine. Yuba City was bustling with its usual activity. Wagons rolled down the main street, kicking up dust. Women with parasols walked along the wooden sidewalks, and men congregated outside the saloon and the general store. Where are you from originally? Catherine asked, curious about this stranger who'd changed the course of her day, possibly her life. Colorado, mostly, Kane said, falling into step beside her. Worked on ranches there since I was 16. Did some time in Wyoming too and a stretch in Montana. Finally decided to drift west, see what California had to offer. And what do you think so far? It's got potential, Kane said, and the way he looked at her made it clear he wasn't just talking about the landscape. Catherine felt warmth rise in her cheeks and looked away, suddenly flustered. She wasn't used to this kind of attention from men. Most of the eligible bachelors in Yuba City had written her off as too independent, too outspoken. Her father had encouraged her to speak her mind, to learn about the ranch and the land, to be capable and strong. It had made her a good rancher, but a poor prospect for marriage in the eyes of most local men. I should get back to my ranch, Catherine said, suddenly aware of how improper it might look to be walking with a man she'd just met. I have work to do before the sun sets. "I'll see you tomorrow morning then," Kane said, settling his hat back on his head. "What time should we meet?" "Dawn would be best," Catherine said. "The ride to the Wilson Ranch takes about an hour and we'll want to get there before the day gets too hot." "Dawn it is," Kane agreed. He tipped his hat to her. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Foster." "Catherine," she said impulsively. "You can call me Catherine." "Catherine," he repeated, and the way he said her name, slow and deliberate, sent a shiver down her spine despite the warm air. "I'm Kane." She watched him walk away toward the saloon, his gait easy and confident, and felt something shift inside her chest. It was too early to call it anything specific, but it was definitely something. The next morning, Catherine was up before the sun, as usual. She dressed in her riding clothes, a split skirt that allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle, which most people in town found scandalous. She didn't care. Side saddle was impractical and dangerous on rough terrain. She braided her long auburn hair and pinned it up under her hat, then headed to the barn to saddle her mare, Duchess. Tom was already up, mucking out the stalls. He was in his 60s, with a weathered face and kind eyes that had seen more than his share of hardship. "Heard about the meeting yesterday," Tom said as Catherine led Duchess out of her stall. "Heard some new fellow stood up for you." "News travels fast," Catherine said, not surprised. In a town the size of Yuba City, gossip moved faster than wildfire. "People are talking," Tom said carefully. "Some good, some bad. You be careful, Catherine. There's folks who don't like it when women step out of their place." "I know," Catherine said, tightening the cinch on her saddle. "But I'm tired of staying silent when I have something important to say. Father never taught me to be quiet." "No, he didn't," Tom agreed with a fond smile. "Robert Foster was a good man, and he'd be proud of you. Just watch your back is all I'm saying." Catherine rode into town as the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. A group of men had already gathered in front of the town hall, including Mayor Thompson, James Wilson, 2 other ranchers, and Kane Reeves. The mayor looked like he'd sucked on a lemon, clearly unhappy about the whole situation, but he was there. Kane was checking his horse's hooves when Catherine rode up. He looked up at her approach and smiled, a genuine expression that lit up his whole face. It made him look younger, more approachable. "Morning, Catherine," he said. "Morning," she replied, acutely aware that several of the other men were watching their interaction with interest. James Wilson cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Foster, you're the guide. Lead the way." They set off, riding east out of town. Catherine led them along the creek for a while, then veered north toward the Wilson property. The land here was beautiful, rolling hills covered in golden grass, with groves of oak trees providing patches of shade. Cattle grazed in the distance, and hawks circled overhead in the clear blue sky. Kane rode beside Catherine for most of the journey. He didn't talk much, but his presence was comfortable, steady. He pointed out a family of deer at one point, and they watched them bound away across the hillside. "How long have you been managing your ranch alone?" Kane asked after a while. 2 years, Catherine said. "Since my father died, he had a fever that came on sudden. He was gone within a week." "I'm sorry," Kane said, and he sounded like he meant it. "That's rough." "It was," Catherine agreed. "Still is sometimes, but the ranch keeps me busy and that helps." "You don't have any siblings?" "No other family nearby. No siblings. My mother died when I was young and my father never remarried. I have an aunt in Sacramento, but we're not close. She thinks I should sell the ranch and become a proper lady." Catherine couldn't keep the bitterness out of her voice. "She doesn't understand that the ranch isn't just property to me. It's home. It's all I have left of my parents." Kane nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand that. A person's land is part of who they are, especially out here. It's not something you give up lightly." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Catherine found herself stealing glances at Kane, taking in the easy way he sat in the saddle, the competent way he handled his horse. There was something reassuring about him, something that made her feel like she could trust him. When they reached the Wilson Ranch, Catherine led them directly to the western edge of the property, where the old oak grove stood. It was a beautiful spot, with massive trees that had been there for hundreds of years, their branches spreading wide to create a canopy of shade. "There," Catherine said, pointing to a spot near the base of the largest oak. "You can see how the grass is greener there, even though we haven't had rain in 2 weeks." The men dismounted and gathered around the spot. James Wilson knelt down, digging his fingers into the soil. It was damp, almost muddy. "I'll be damned," Wilson muttered. He stood up and looked at Catherine with newfound respect. "You were right. How did you even find this?" "I like to explore," Catherine said simply. "I've ridden all over this area. I notice things." Kane was walking around the area, studying the lay of the land. "If you dug a well here about 15 feet down, you'd probably hit a strong flow. Could run pipes from here to wherever you need water on the ranch. Wouldn't need to touch the creek at all." Wilson nodded slowly. "That would work. That would work well, actually." He turned to the mayor. "I'll withdraw my petition for increased creek water. We'll dig a well here instead." Mayor Thompson looked like he wanted to argue, but he had no ground to stand on. The solution was obvious and beneficial to everyone. He gave a curt nod. "Very well. I'll make a note of it in the town records." As the group prepared to ride back to town, Kane pulled Catherine aside. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "You just solved a problem that's been plaguing this town for months." "I just paid attention to the land," Catherine said, feeling pleased but trying not to show it too much. "It's more than that," Kane insisted. "You saw something no one else saw, and you had the courage to speak up about it, even when people tried to silence you. That takes strength." Catherine looked up at him, struck by the sincerity in his voice. "You're the one who gave me the chance to speak. If you hadn't said something, they would have dismissed me again." "Then I guess we make a good team," Kane said, and there was something in his eyes that made Catherine's heart skip a beat. They rode back to town together, this time talking more freely. Kane told her about his childhood in Colorado, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the harsh winters and the beautiful summers. Catherine told him about growing up on the ranch, about her father teaching her to rope cattle and fix fences, about the books she loved to read, and the dreams she had for expanding her small ranch someday. By the time they reached Yuba City, Catherine felt like she'd known Kane for years, instead of just one day. There was an ease between them that she'd never experienced with anyone else, a natural connection that felt both exciting and comfortable at the same time. Over the next few weeks, Kane found reasons to visit the Foster Ranch with increasing frequency. At first, it was to bring news about the well they were digging on the Wilson property. Then it was to ask for advice about the best grazing areas. Then it was simply to stop by and say hello, sometimes bringing fresh caught fish from the creek or wildflowers he'd spotted on his morning rides. Catherine found herself looking forward to his visits, dressing a little more carefully in the mornings just in case he stopped by. She told herself she was being foolish, that he was probably just being friendly, but the way he looked at her suggested something more. Tom noticed, of course. The old ranch hand didn't miss much. "That Reeves fellow seems to be around a lot," Tom commented one afternoon while they were mending fences together. "He's been helpful," Catherine said, trying to sound casual. "He knows a lot about ranching." Tom made a non-committal sound. "He's got eyes for you, Catherine. Anyone can see that." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. Even if that's true, it doesn't mean anything. He'll probably move on eventually, Men like him always do. Maybe, Tom said, hammering a nail into the fence post. Or maybe he's found a reason to stay. One evening in early May, Kane rode up to the ranch just as the sun was setting. Catherine was on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air after a long day of work. She'd been checking the irrigation ditches that afternoon, making sure water was flowing properly to all her pastures. "Evening, Catherine," Kane said, dismounting and tying his horse to the porch rail. "Evening, Kane," she replied, patting the spot on the porch steps beside her. "What brings you out this way?" Kane sat down, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Wanted to see you," he said simply. "Is that a good enough reason?" Catherine's heart fluttered. "I suppose it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The air was filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle settling down for the night. "I've been thinking," Kane said finally, his voice low and serious, "about that first day at the town meeting. About how angry I felt when I saw them treating you like you didn't matter, like your ideas weren't worth hearing just because you're a woman." "It's been like that for a long time," Catherine said quietly. "Even before my father died, some people in town thought he was wrong to teach me about ranching, to treat me like a son instead of a daughter. After he died, it got worse. You know what I think?" Kane turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. "I think you're one of the smartest, most capable people I've ever met. Man or woman doesn't matter. You know this land, you understand it, and you're not afraid to work hard. That's worth more than most people realize." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd been holding on to her determination for so long, fighting to prove herself, that hearing someone simply acknowledge her worth without any conditions or qualifications attached was overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much that means to me." Kane reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "I think I'm falling for you, Catherine. I've been trying to fight it, telling myself it's too soon, that we barely know each other. But the truth is, I feel like I've been looking for you my whole life." Catherine's breath caught. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. In the fading light, she could see the vulnerability in his expression, the hope mixed with fear of rejection. "I've been falling for you too," she admitted. "Since that first day when you stood up for me, no one's ever done that before." Kane smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed his whole face. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Catherine breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she didn't want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and possibility. Catherine's eyes fluttered closed, and she let herself get lost in the moment, in the feeling of being wanted and valued and cherished. When they pulled apart, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have much to offer," he said quietly. "Just a foreman's wages and a reputation for hard work. But I promise you, Catherine, if you'll have me, I'll spend every day making sure you know how much you matter." "That's more than enough," Catherine said, tears spilling down her cheeks now, but they were happy tears. "More than I ever expected to find." They sat on the porch until the stars came out, talking about their hopes and dreams, making plans for a future together. Kane wanted to save up enough money to buy his own ranch someday, to build something lasting. Catherine wanted to expand her father's ranch, to honor his memory by making it successful and prosperous. They realized that together, they could achieve both goals. But not everything in Yuba City was pleased about their growing relationship. Mayor Thompson, who'd never liked being challenged, especially by a woman, began spreading rumors about Catherine. He suggested that she was behaving improperly, that her relationship with Kane was scandalous, that she was proving herself unfit to manage a ranch alone. The gossip reached Catherine's ears one morning when she went to town for supplies. She was in the general store, picking out flour and sugar, when she heard two women talking in hushed voices behind a shelf of dry goods. "I heard she practically threw herself at him," one woman said. "No shame at all. Her poor father would be mortified." "Well, what do you expect?" the other woman replied. "She's been living alone all this time, no proper supervision. It's no wonder she's forgotten how to behave like a lady." Catherine felt anger surge through her. She stepped around the shelf, startling both women. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartley, Mrs. Thompson," Catherine said coldly. She recognized them both, pillars of the town's social circle. Mrs. Thompson was the mayor's wife, which explained a lot. Both women had the decency to look embarrassed at being caught gossiping. "If you have something to say about me, I'd appreciate it if you'd say it to my face," Catherine continued, her voice steady despite the fury coursing through her. "My relationship with Kane Reeves is honorable and proper. We've done nothing wrong, and even if we had, it would be none of your concern." "Well, I never," Mrs. Thompson sputtered, her face flushing red. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Catherine said. "You've never had to work for anything, never had to fight to have your voice heard. You can't imagine what it's like to be dismissed and ignored simply because of your gender. So when you see a woman who refuses to be silent, who dares to live her life on her own terms, you tear her down with gossip and lies." She turned and walked to the counter, where the shopkeeper, Mr. Chen, was carefully not looking at the confrontation. He rang up her purchases quickly, clearly wanting to avoid getting involved. As Catherine was leaving, Mrs. Thompson called after her. "You'll regret this, Miss Foster. The mayor won't stand for being disrespected." Catherine paused at the door and looked back. "The mayor can take his offense and his outdated rules and choke on them. I'm done being quiet." She walked out with her head held high, but her hands were shaking as she loaded her supplies into her wagon. She just made a powerful enemy, and she knew there would be consequences. The consequences came faster than she expected. That afternoon, Mayor Thompson himself rode out to her ranch with the town sheriff, a thin, nervous man named George Paulson, who mostly did whatever the mayor told him to do. Catherine was in the barn, treating a cow that had injured its leg, when she heard the horses approaching. She wiped her hands on a rag and walked out to meet them, her heart sinking when she saw their grim expressions. "Miss Foster," the mayor said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm here in my official capacity to inform you that there have been complaints about your conduct. Multiple citizens have expressed concern about your ability to maintain this property according to community standards." "What are you talking about?" Catherine demanded. "This ranch is in perfect order." "That's not what we've heard," the mayor said smugly. "We've received reports of neglected fences, wandering cattle, and improper water usage. As the town's chief administrator, I have the authority to investigate these claims." Catherine's hands clenched into fists. "This is retaliation because I stood up to your wife this morning. You're abusing your power, Mayor Thompson." "I'm doing my duty," the mayor said coldly. "Sheriff Paulson will be conducting an inspection of your property. If he finds any violations, you could face fines or even lose your water rights." Tom emerged from the house, his face dark with anger. "This is nonsense, Mayor, and you know it. This ranch is run better than half the spreads in this county." "I'll be the judge of that," Sheriff Paulson said, though he looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. They spent the next hour combing over the property, looking for any excuse to find fault. Catherine followed them, her anger growing with each passing minute. They criticized fence posts that were perfectly sturdy, questioned her irrigation methods despite the clear health of her pastures, and even suggested her cattle looked underfed, though anyone with eyes could see they were in excellent condition. Finally, They returned to their horses. "We'll be filing a report," Mayor Thompson said with satisfaction. "You can expect to hear from us within the week about what corrective actions you'll need to take." After they left, Catherine sank down on the porch steps, feeling defeated for the first time since her father died. Tom sat beside her, his expression troubled. "They can't really take your water rights, can they?" Catherine asked. "Legally, probably not," Tom said, "but they can make your life difficult, tie you up in bureaucracy and fines until you can't afford to fight anymore." Catherine buried her face in her hands. "I won't sell. I won't give up Father's ranch." "I know you won't," Tom said gently, "but you might need help fighting this." That evening, Kane arrived to find Catherine sitting on the porch, staring out at the sunset with hollow eyes. He took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Catherine told him everything, from the confrontation at the general store to the mayor's vindictive inspection. Kane's face grew darker with each word. "That son of a bitch," Kane said when she finished. "He's abusing his power because you bruised his ego." "What can I do?" Catherine asked, hating the helplessness in her own voice. "He's the mayor. He has the sheriff on his side. I'm just one woman with a small ranch." Kane was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his expression cleared and he squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, you have me, and you have something else too. You have the respect of James Wilson." Catherine looked at him, not understanding. "What does that matter?" "James Wilson is the most powerful rancher in this county," Kane explained. "He has connections, influence, and he owes you. You found that spring for him, solved his water problem. He told me himself that you saved him thousands of dollars and possibly his whole operation. You think he'd stand up to the mayor for me?" "I think it's worth asking," Kane said. "And I think once we explain what's happening, he'll be on your side. Wilson's a fair man. He won't like seeing someone persecuted for political reasons." The next morning, Kane and Catherine rode to the Wilson ranch together. It was a large operation, with dozens of ranch hands and thousands of head of cattle. James Wilson received them in his study, a comfortable room lined with books and hunting trophies. Catherine laid out the whole situation, trying to keep her voice calm and factual. Wilson listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more severe as she spoke. "The mayor's a fool," Wilson said when she finished, "and a vindictive one at that. But he's also scared of you, Miss Foster. You showed him up at that town meeting, proved that a woman could see solutions that all the men in the room missed. That terrifies men like him." "Can you help her?" Kane asked directly. Wilson leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "I can do better than that. I can make sure the mayor never bothers you again." He stood up and went to his desk, pulling out a sheet of paper and dipping his pen in ink. "I'm going to write a letter to the county government, formally commending you for your contributions to the community. I'll detail how you solved the water dispute and saved multiple ranches from serious hardship. I'll also express my concern about potential abuse of power by town officials." "Will that be enough?" Catherine asked, hardly daring to hope. "It will when I get 5 other ranchers to sign it with me," Wilson said with a grim smile. "The county takes corruption seriously, especially when it's confirmed by the area's largest taxpayers. Thompson will back off or lose his position." Catherine felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I don't know how to repay you." "You already did," Wilson said simply. "You helped me when I needed it. Now I'm returning the favor. That's how things should work." True to his word, Wilson gathered support from other influential ranchers in the area. Within 3 days, a letter signed by 6 of the county's most powerful landowners was submitted to the county seat. The mayor received a formal inquiry about his conduct, and the threatened fines and restrictions against Catherine were quietly dropped. But the victory came with an unexpected cost. A week after the letter was sent, Kane received word that he was being let go from his position at the Wilson Ranch. When he went to ask why, the foreman who delivered the message looked uncomfortable. "It's not Wilson's decision," the man explained. "It's his wife. She's friends with Mrs. Thompson, and she's been giving him hell about employing you when you're courting Miss Foster. Wilson fought it, but you know how it is. Happy wife, happy life." Kane took the news stoically, but Catherine was furious when he told her that evening. "This is my fault," she said, pacing back and forth in her small kitchen. "You lost your job because of me." "I'd lose 100 jobs if it meant keeping you safe," Kane said calmly. "Besides, I've been thinking about making a change anyway." Catherine stopped pacing and looked at him. "What kind of change?" Kane took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer. Don't say yes just because you feel guilty about me losing my job." "Okay," Catherine said slowly. "Marry me," Kane said. "Not someday in the future. Now. Soon. I love you, Catherine. I want to build a life with you. We can combine our resources, make your ranch stronger. I've saved most of my wages over the years. It's enough to buy cattle, fix up the barn, maybe even hire another hand or two. Together, we could make this place really succeed." Catherine stared at him, her mind racing. She dreamed of marriage, of finding someone who would be a true partner, but she'd never expected it to happen like this, so fast and so intense. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words out loud made them feel even more real. "But are you sure? Marriage is permanent. You'd be tied to this ranch, to this town, to me." Kane crossed the room and took her hands in his. "There's nowhere else I want to be. Catherine, you're the bravest, smartest, most extraordinary person I've ever met. You see me for who I really am, and you don't try to change me. And I see you, all of you, and I think you're perfect exactly as you are." "I'm not perfect," Catherine said with a shaky laugh. "I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I have a terrible temper." "I know," Kane said, grinning. "I love all of that about you." Catherine felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Kane kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Catherine kissed him back with all the love and hope and joy she'd been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "I'll make you happy," he promised. "Every single day I'll make you happy." "You already do," Catherine said. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Yuba City. Tom gave Catherine away, tears streaming down his weathered face. James Wilson and his wife attended, though Mrs. Wilson looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Most of the town stayed away, still disapproving of Catherine's unconventional ways, but the people who mattered were there. The ceremony was short and sweet. Kane wore his best suit, and Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, which she'd carefully altered to fit. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. After the ceremony, they held a small celebration at the ranch. Tom had arranged for a local woman to cook, and there was music and dancing as the sun set over the golden hills. Catherine danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling happier than she ever thought possible. That night, in the bedroom that had been Catherine's alone for so long, Kane made love to her with tenderness and passion. He was gentle with her, mindful of her innocence, but there was an intensity to their connection that left them both breathless. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the sheets, talking quietly in the darkness. "I can't believe this is real," Catherine whispered. "6 weeks ago, I couldn't even speak at a town meeting. Now I'm married to the most wonderful man in the world." "Believe it," Kane said, kissing her forehead. "This is just the beginning, Catherine. We're going to build something amazing together." And they did. Over the next few months, Kane threw himself into improving the ranch with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He used his savings to buy 20 head of high-quality cattle, breeding stock that would improve their herd. He repaired the barn, fixing the roof and reinforcing the walls. He and Tom worked together to dig new irrigation ditches and improve the pastures. Catherine managed the business side of things, keeping careful records of their expenses and income, negotiating prices with buyers and planning for the future. Together, they made decisions about which cattle to sell and which to keep, where to graze their herds, when to plant hay for winter feed. The ranch began to prosper in ways it never had before. By the end of their first year of marriage, they doubled their cattle herd and increased their profits significantly. They were able to hire 2 more ranch hands, young men from town who were eager to learn. Tom became more of a supervisor than a laborer, his experience invaluable in training the new workers. But Catherine's fight for respect in Yuba City wasn't over. The following spring, in 1883, there was another contentious town meeting, this time about funding for the local school. The mayor wanted to cut the budget, arguing that the town couldn't afford a full-time teacher. Catherine, who'd attended every town meeting since her marriage, couldn't stay silent. "Our children deserve a proper education," she said, standing up in the crowded hall. "If we cut funding now, we're limiting their future opportunities." "Miss Foster," the mayor began, then caught himself with a sneer. "I mean, Mrs. Reeves, this is a financial matter. Perhaps you don't understand the complexities." "I understand perfectly well," Catherine said firmly. "I also understand that investing in education pays dividends for the entire community. Educated children grow up to be productive citizens who can build successful businesses and contribute to the local economy." Kane stood up beside her. "My wife is right, and I'd like to propose a solution. What if the ranchers in the area contributed a portion of our profits to the school fund? Those of us who can afford it should support the education of all the children in this county, not just our own." James Wilson stood up next. "I'll commit 10% of my annual profits to the school fund," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. "Who else is with me?" One by one, other ranchers stood up, pledging their support. The mayor's face grew redder with each pledge, but he couldn't argue against such overwhelming support from the community's most influential members. By the end of the meeting, the school had more than enough funding, and a committee had been formed to oversee its use. Catherine was elected to the committee, the first woman in Yuba City history to hold such a position. Walking home that evening, Kane put his arm around Catherine's shoulders. "You're changing this town," he said with pride. "Slowly but surely, you're changing it." "We're changing it," Catherine corrected. "I couldn't do any of this without you." That summer, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She'd been feeling tired and queasy for a few weeks, and when the doctor in town confirmed her suspicions, she was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. She told Kane that evening while they were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. He was so stunned that he didn't speak for a full minute, and Catherine began to worry about his reaction. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Kane said, pulling back to look at her face. "Catherine, you've made me the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was difficult at times. Catherine was determined to keep working on the ranch for as long as possible, but by her 7th month, Kane and Tom conspired to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. She chafed at the restrictions but knew they were right to be cautious. In late March of 1884, Catherine went into labor. It was a long, difficult delivery that lasted through the night and into the next day. Kane stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, and whispering words of encouragement. When their son finally arrived, wailing lustily and waving tiny fists, Catherine burst into tears of relief and joy. Kane cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, then cradled his son with a look of absolute wonder on his face. "He's perfect," Kane breathed. "Catherine, he's perfect." They named him Robert, after Catherine's father. Little Robert had his mother's auburn hair and his father's gray eyes, and from the very beginning, he had a strong will and a loud voice. Motherhood transformed Catherine in ways she never expected. She'd always been independent and self-sufficient, but now she discovered a fierce protective instinct that made her previous determination look pale by comparison. She would do anything, fight anyone, to keep her son safe and give him the best life possible. But she didn't give up her work on the ranch or her involvement in town affairs. With Kane's support and Tom's help, she managed to balance her responsibilities as a mother with her other roles. She brought baby Robert to town meetings in a basket, nursing him discreetly when needed, refusing to be pushed out of public life just because she was now a mother. Her presence, and her refusal to conform to traditional expectations, continued to challenge the town's attitudes. Slowly, other women began to find their voices. At a town meeting in the fall of 1884, 3 other women stood up to speak on various issues. Mayor Thompson looked apoplectic, but he couldn't silence them all. By 1885, the culture in Yuba City had shifted noticeably. Women were regularly attending and participating in town meetings. A women's auxiliary group had formed to address community needs like food for poor families and care for the elderly. Catherine was at the center of many of these changes, though she always deflected credit to the other women who were equally committed to improving their town. The Foster Reeves Ranch continued to thrive. By their 3rd year of marriage, they owned over 200 head of cattle and had expanded their property by purchasing an adjacent 40 acres. They'd built a larger house with an extra bedroom for Robert and space for future children. The old house became living quarters for Tom and the other ranch hands. In the spring of 1886, Catherine gave birth to their 2nd child, a daughter they named Mary. She had Kane's dark hair and Catherine's green eyes, and she was a quieter, gentler baby than Robert had been. Catherine loved both her children fiercely, marveling at how different they were even from infancy. Kane was an involved, loving father. He took Robert with him when he worked on the ranch, teaching the boy about horses and cattle from the time he could walk. He was equally tender with Mary, singing her to sleep and dancing with her in his arms when she was fussy. One evening when Mary was about 6 months old, Catherine stood in the doorway of the children's bedroom, watching Kane rock their daughter while Robert played with toy horses on the floor. Her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. Kane looked up and caught her watching. He smiled that smile that still made her knees weak, even after 4 years of marriage. "Come here," he said softly. Catherine crossed the room and leaned against him, one hand on Mary's soft head. Robert abandoned his toys and wrapped his arms around his mother's legs. They stood like that for a moment, a perfect tableau of family and love. "You remember that first town meeting?" Kane asked quietly. "When I told you your opinion mattered most?" "I remember," Catherine said. "I had no idea then how much you'd come to mean to me," Kane continued. "How you change my whole life, make me want to be better, do better. You've given me everything, Catherine. A home, a family, a purpose. I wake up every day grateful that I walked into that meeting, that I had the courage to speak up." "I'm the grateful one," Catherine said, tears pricking her eyes. "You saw me when everyone else wanted me to be invisible. You valued me when others dismissed me. You loved me exactly as I am." They put the children to bed together, then went out to the porch to watch the stars come out. It had become their nightly ritual when weather permitted, this quiet time together after the children were asleep and the ranch work was done. "I've been thinking," Kane said, his arm around Catherine's shoulders, "about expanding the ranch even more. There's a piece of land to the south that's going up for sale. Good grazing, year-round water. We could afford it now." "That would make us one of the larger ranches in the area," Catherine said thoughtfully. "It would," Kane agreed. "Is that something you want?" Catherine considered the question seriously. "I want to build something lasting," she said finally. "Something we can pass down to Robert and Mary and any other children we might have. I want our family to be secure, respected. Not because we're the biggest or the richest, but because we're fair and honest and we contribute to our community." "Then that's what we'll do," Kane said simply. They purchased the southern parcel in the fall of 1886, bringing their total holdings to over 200 acres. The ranch required more labor now, so they hired 2 more hands and promoted one of their original workers to assistant foreman. Tom, now in his 70s, finally agreed to retire from physical labor, though he still came by every day to give advice and play with the children. As the ranch grew, so did Catherine's influence in the community. In 1887, she was elected to the town council, the first woman in Yuba City to hold such a position. Mayor Thompson had finally been voted out of office the previous year, replaced by a more progressive merchant who believed in equal representation. Catherine's first act as a council member was to propose a revision to the town bylaws explicitly stating that all citizens, regardless of gender, had the right to speak and vote at town meetings. The measure passed unanimously. Over the years, Catherine and Kane became pillars of the Yuba City community. They were known for their fair treatment of workers, their generosity to those in need, and their willingness to speak truth even when it was uncomfortable. They hosted community gatherings at their ranch, bringing people together to celebrate harvests and holidays. In 1889, they had their third child, another son they named Thomas after the man who'd been such a loyal friend to Catherine and her father. Tom cried when they told him, honored beyond words. He lived another 5 years, long enough to see young Thomas take his first steps and say his first words. Tom died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1894. The whole town turned out for his funeral. Catherine spoke at the service, talking about his loyalty, his wisdom, and his kindness. She wept openly, mourning the loss of someone who'd been more family than employee. The years passed, bringing both joys and sorrows. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Robert grew into a thoughtful, capable young man who loved the land as much as his mother did. Mary showed an aptitude for numbers and began helping with the ranch accounts when she was barely into her teens. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but with a heart of gold. In 1895, Catherine gave birth to twin daughters, Eleanor and Grace. The pregnancy was difficult, and at 45 years old, Catherine knew these would be her last children. But she loved the twins fiercely, delighting in their identical faces and different personalities. Kane, now in his 40s, had a touch of gray at his temples, but he was still strong and vital. He adored his daughters, all 3 of them, and was determined to raise them with the same respect for their intelligence and capabilities that he'd always shown Catherine. By the turn of the century, in 1900, the Reeves family was firmly established as one of the most respected in Yuba City. Robert, now 16, was being courted by several of the local girls, though he claimed he was too busy with ranch work to be interested. Mary, at 14, had already declared her intention to attend college and study business. A shocking ambition for a young woman, but one that her parents supported wholeheartedly. Thomas, at 11, was still finding his way, torn between following his older brother into ranching and his own interest in becoming a doctor. The twins, now 5, were a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, constantly asking questions and getting into everything. Catherine and Kane sat on their porch one evening in September of 1900, watching the sun set over land they'd built together. Catherine was 40 now, her auburn hair streaked with gray. Kane was 43, laugh lines crinkling around his eyes. They'd been married for 18 years, and every day Kane still told her he loved her. "You ever think about that first town meeting?" Catherine asked, echoing their conversation from years ago. "Sometimes," Kane said. "I think about how close I came to not saying anything. I'd only been in town 3 days. It wasn't my place to speak up." "But you did anyway," Catherine said. "I couldn't help it," Kane said with a smile. "You were standing there so brave and determined, and they were treating you like you didn't matter. It made me angry. And then I heard you speak, heard the intelligence and knowledge in your words, and I knew you were someone special." "I'm not special," Catherine protested. "You are to me," Kane said firmly. "You're the most special person in the world to me. You changed my life, Catherine. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working jobs that meant nothing, going nowhere. You gave me purpose, family, love. Everything good in my life started the day I met you." Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks. Even after all these years, Kane could still make her cry with his words. "I love you," she whispered. "So much." "I love you too," Kane said, pulling her close. "Forever." They sat together as the stars came out, listening to the sounds of their children playing inside the house, the lowing of cattle settling for the night, the rustle of wind through the trees. This was the life they'd built together, acre by acre, day by day. It hadn't always been easy. There had been droughts and disease, difficult births and painful losses. But through it all, they'd had each other. In the years that followed, the Reeves children grew and pursued their own dreams. Robert eventually married the daughter of a neighboring rancher and took over much of the day-to-day management of the ranch. Mary did go to college, one of the first women in the county to do so, and eventually opened her own accounting firm in Sacramento. Thomas studied medicine and became a doctor, setting up practice in Yuba City. The twins, Alina and Grace, were the most like their mother. They attended every town council meeting from the time they were teenagers, speaking up on issues they cared about. Alina eventually ran for mayor and won, becoming the first female mayor of Yuba City in 1920. Grace became a lawyer, fighting for women's rights and labor rights throughout California. Catherine lived to see all of her children successful and happy, living lives of purpose and meaning. She served on the town council for over 30 years, finally retiring in 1920 at the age of 60. Kane remained active on the ranch into his 60s, finally handing over full control to Robert when his arthritis made riding difficult. They spent their final years together much as they'd spent their first, sitting on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset over the land they loved. They had 14 grandchildren between their 5 children, and the ranch house was always full of noise and laughter when the family gathered for holidays. Catherine and Kane celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1932, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and a few great-grandchildren who were just beginning to arrive. The whole town celebrated with them, recognizing the contribution they'd made to building Yuba City into a place where everyone's voice mattered, regardless of gender. Kane died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1935, at the age of 78. He and Catherine had been married for 53 years. Catherine mourned him deeply, feeling like half of herself had been torn away. But she found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they'd built together. She lived another 3 years, dying in the spring of 1938 at the age of 78. Her last words, whispered to Robert, who sat at her bedside, were, "Tell your father I'm coming. Tell him to wait for me." They buried her next to Kane on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading oak tree. The whole town attended the funeral, and speaker after speaker rose to talk about Catherine's courage, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to justice and equality. Robert stood last to speak, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother taught me that every voice matters," he said. "That courage isn't about being fearless, but about speaking up even when you're afraid. She changed this town, changed all of us, simply by refusing to be silent. And my father loved her for exactly who she was, never asking her to be smaller or quieter or less than she was." Together, they showed us all what a true partnership looks like. As the years passed, the story of Catherine Foster and Kane Reeves became legend in Yuba City. The town they'd helped build continued to thrive, a place where men and women worked together as equals, where courage and intelligence were valued over tradition and prejudice. The ranch passed down through the generations, always kept within the family. Robert's son eventually took it over, then his son after that. Each generation remembered the story of how it all began, with a brave woman who refused to be silent and a cowboy who recognized that her opinion mattered most. In 1985, on what would have been Catherine's 125th birthday, the town of Yuba City dedicated a statue in the town square. It showed a woman standing tall and proud, and beside her, a man looking at her with obvious love and respect. The plaque reads simply, "Catherine Foster Reeves and Kane Reeves, partners in building our community." Their great-great-grandchildren attended the dedication, along with dozens of other descendants. The mayor of Yuba City, a young woman who'd grown up hearing stories about Catherine's courage, spoke about how Catherine's legacy continued to inspire new generations. "Catherine Reeves showed us that change starts with one voice," the mayor said. "With one person brave enough to speak the truth, and another person brave enough to listen and amplify that voice. She changed our town, but she also changed the world, one person at a time. That's a legacy worth honoring, worth continuing." And so the story lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that love and courage can change the world, that every voice matters, and that true partnership is built on respect, equality, and unwavering support. Catherine and Kane's love story became part of the fabric of Yuba City, a testament to what's possible when people see each other for who they truly are and choose to build something beautiful together. The ranch still stands today, over 140 years after Catherine's father first established it. The original house is gone, replaced by newer buildings, but the land remains in the family. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful town meeting in 1882, the family gathers to remember the day everything changed, the day a cowboy stood up for a woman who wasn't allowed to speak and said the words that changed both their lives forever. "Your opinion matters most." 5 simple words that sparked a love story for the ages, that built a family dynasty, that helped transform a town and challenge the prejudices of an era. Catherine and Kane's story proves that love isn't just about romance and passion, though they had plenty of both. True love is about seeing someone fully, valuing them completely, and standing beside them as they fight their battles and chase their dreams. Their love endured through 53 years of marriage, through hardships and triumphs, through the raising of 5 children and the building of a prosperous ranch. It endured in the values they instilled in their children, in the example they set for their community, in the changes they helped bring about in how women were treated and valued. And in the end, that's the greatest legacy anyone can leave. A love that not only sustained 2 people through a lifetime together, but rippled outward to touch countless other lives, to make the world a little bit better, a little bit more just, a little bit more equal. Catherine and Kane Reeves did that together, one day at a time. From that first moment in the town hall to their final days on the ranch, they'd built with their own hands and hearts. Their story reminds us that one moment of courage can change everything, that standing up for what's right matters, and that love, real love, is about being true partners in every sense of the word. It's about fighting together, building together, and never asking the person you love to be anything less than who they truly are. That's the story of Catherine and Kane, a love story born in the dusty town halls of the Old West, nurtured on the golden hills of California, and remembered long after they were gone. A story of forbidden voices finding the courage to speak, and open hearts finding the wisdom to listen. A story that proves love can indeed change the world, one opinion, one voice, one brave moment at a time.